Alright, well welcome back. I'm going to do a little work on the Volvo today. And all done with the truck for the winter, so I'll be starting to work on that also. Taking apart all the wiring. I want to redo the wiring, add air conditioning, and a couple other things. The track actually finally closed for the year. They sent something out on Facebook the other day, so it's time to just tear it down and work on it again. For the Volvo, I'm going to be starting to work on the fuel system a little bit. I have the fuel tank out, and I have a flange that I'm going to be welding in there. So I ended up getting this flange from Brian. It is a Subaru flange, I believe it is. He had a spare, so he let me use it. He has 8-second Volvo 240 that I've had on the channel a couple times, and he's the one I bought this car from. He had a spare flange laying around, so he gave it to me. So I'm going to start to mark this thing out and get it welded in. So my plan here is to go with a dual Walbro setup. This is my old setup from the Ranger when I had the stock gas tank in there. So I'm just going to reuse these pumps. They've been sitting around for a while, but they should work. I'll go ahead and mark this up. I'm just going to mark the outside of the flange for now, and then I'll cut a little bit on the inside of it. This does actually line up pretty good with where this other piece is spot welded on there, right on the outer edges. This tank has been empty. It's been sitting for a couple months, so I don't think there's any gas in it that I have to worry about, any vapor, but I'll double check that. I don't want that thing, exploding on me. I think that happened to Billy from that street racing channel. He was drilling in a tank recently or a couple months ago, and the vapor blew up in his face, so that's not good. I don't want to do that. Okay, so I went ahead and took this flange and then welded some studs in there. I just took some M8 125 bolts and welded them in on the back side, and then I'll be able to weld this guy in. So coming around this side, doesn't look too bad, but then we got a little bit of a gap there. So just where the bolts were and a little bit along the front, we got some gaps. So just gonna keep on working on that, and then I'll come back when it's done. Okay, got her all welded up. Does look a little wavy and kind of boogery in some spots, because some spots are a little hard to get some material into, like that booger there, but got that flange all in there. You have a gasket and a top piece for it. I'll have to drill this thing out next and start figuring out how I'm going to hang the pump. Here's some of the parts I got for this thing. I bought this. This is actually kind of cool. I'm kind of excited to use this. This is a weld-in bung that's going to go into the top piece, and then it has this little bulkhead with a removable plug on the bottom, and then also a removable plug on the top for the wiring, and it comes with all the terminals and plugs and all that stuff, and a big snap ring to hold it in there. A little pricey for that thing, but I'm excited to use that. I thought it was really cool, so I wanted to use that. And then my plan for the hanger and all that stuff is to kind of do it similar to how I did the Escalade. So when I did the Escalade, I got these 3/8 barbs. I cut them in half, and then I was able to weld the barbs onto a tube. So I also picked up the stainless tube. My plan here is to, this goes on here, and my plan is to weld this to the bottom of this here, and then this will actually be the outlet. I'll drill a hole and then weld an 8AN bung on the top of it. So the feed will come in from the bottom. That'll also act partially as a hanger, and then I'll go in and weld this onto the bottom. So essentially I'll be able to hang the pumps from this, run the pump outlet into the barb, which will send fuel up here and then out the top of the hat. and then this will also act as a hanger to hang the pumps on. Similar to how I did the Escalade triple Volvo setup. Makes sense in my head. Hopefully it works. Then my feed and return will end up looking something like this probably. Return here, feed in the middle, and then this one's gonna be a 6AN when I get the fitting. So outlet there, tube welded down, pumps hanging, wiring there, return, and then I'll be able to probably just end up using the other part of the barb that I have here, hang that down, and then just run a tube back into the tank. Alright, so change it up a little bit. I'm not gonna run the stainless tube all the way to the bottom. I'm just gonna make a little piece that hangs from the top. And then I think what I'm going to do is use a exhaust hanger for a rod, and that's what I'm going to hang the pumps on. So I took this little section and then pressed it out so it's actually an oval shape. And then I took these barb fittings, cut them, and then turned the end down on the lathe so that they fit inside here nice. And then I just cut that at an angle and pressed it down. So I have a nice little Y fitting there, and then I'm going to weld around it, and that should be good. And I like that angle because it comes more down. A lot of the Y fittings that you buy are like spread way out like that. So I can kind of put it at the angle I want and be good. A lot of people always get weird when I make stuff like this. Like, oh, why don't you just buy a fitting? Because they usually don't come out the way that I want if you just buy them. They're like at a weird angle or whatever. And I like to make stuff, but that hurts people's feelings sometimes when you make things. So I'm going to do that. I'll get that thing welded up and start working on the rest of it. I'm still waiting on my 6AN fittings. Those should be here today or tomorrow. Okay, here's the piece all welded up. Didn't use any filler around it. Just kind of melted it all around. Worked pretty good. Now we have this cool looking piece. Hangs down. We'll be able to go 2 pumps right into the bottom. And the plan is to weld this to the bottom of the plate like this. And then use the little rod probably hanging off of the bottom or something like that to hang the pumps on. Right, so got a little more work done on the top piece. I used a 2-inch hole saw to hog that out, and then I turned this down on the lathe a little bit so it would sit flush with the back side of the plate. And then I just drilled a 1/2-inch hole and turned this down so it had a 1/2-inch flange on it. This one I kind of messed up the spot on the first drill, so that's why that hole's a little weird, but should be able to weld it all from the back side. And that's the plan. That's what it looks like. I want to weld it all from the back. So you can see that this is just flush there. I'll weld it on the back side. This is flush. I'll weld here, and then I'll weld that guy on. I also just took one of the remaining hose barbs and then welded it to the back side of this AN fitting. So I'll have the 6AN return, and then I'll just be able to do a clamp-on hose barb that just goes into the bottom of the tank for the return. So I'll do that, and then I'll weld this on, but I was just debating if I just wanted to weld this right to here and then punch it through. I gotta decide now on that, or if I just want to weld it onto the bottom of that. Maybe that'll be easier to just weld it like that. But that's the plan. Alright, got those welded in. I didn't do a whole lot of filler, just tried to stick it together really, so the beads are really far apart and I didn't do a whole lot of filler in there. And then the middle one I barely did any. I'm just going to let it cool down a little bit and then I can weld that barb in. It's just too hot for me to hold it right now. Alright, so here it is, mocked up. I did weld the rod to the top piece, and I just have it zip tied in there right now. The wiring zip tied up. And you can see this return just comes down. Some similar to that is how it's going to go in there. So right now I'm just kind of testing the depth and see where I need everything to be. This seems pretty good. Goes right into the factory bucket inside the tank. And I think I'm going to wait to do the wiring until I get my wiring stuff, or plan to do the wiring on the car. I also do want to add the level sender on there, so I gotta find where that thing is. I don't even know where it is right now, but I'll be able to make a bracket and then weld the factory level sender in there, and that should work out pretty nice. Alright, so I did find the other hat. And pretty good guess on the height there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut this whole float assembly off, and then I'll be able to weld it back on. So this is actually just spot welded onto the return. It looks like the return. So I'm just going to cut that off, and then I'll be able to weld it right to this rod. Alright, so there it is there. I just ended up using the rest of that exhaust hanger bracket and cut that off, welded this thing on. And I did put a little bit of a bend in the float there, just over this way, so it clears the bucket for sure. So there's full, there's all the way down, just resting here, and then all the way up. So that should work pretty well. And I have it on the outside of the return line here, just kind of hugged around that, so it won't interfere with the return hose at all. I did buy like a 90-degree fitting for the bottom of this. I want to have it come down and then just kick out to the side away from the pumps. So if there's any bubbles or anything, it's not, you know, blowing it right back into the feed for the pumps. I ordered some submersible E85 hose and some clamps, so I'll put that all on there, and then I'll do the wiring when I do the wiring for the car. But this thing is looking pretty good. I'm happy with how it turned out. And it tucks in real nice. Well, I spoke too soon. I haven't test fitted this yet, but alright, that wasn't so bad. And then there we go.